Hey, what's up everybody? In this video, I'm going to review Charm Flower Snow White from the Snow White series. And the ability description for Flower Snow White is that she's going to clear all Tsums in the center. Out of all three of the new Tsums that's currently out, Flower Snow White is going to be the easiest one to use out of the three. And the drop rates for Flower Snow White is going to be the same as Flower Aurora, but it is easier to get compared to Flower Cinderella. Okay, so let's get into the stats. In order for you to activate her ability, you're going to need to clear anywhere between 25 to 30 copies of her off the screen. This number is going to vary depending on what skill level you have her at. And the minimum score for Flower Charm Snow White is going to be 40 with a maximum score of 1069. So at the higher skill levels, she's pretty good for her score. Not that great when you have her at the lower skill level. And all of my gameplays are going to be at lower skill levels because they're all my first attempts. And if you want to get her to skill level 6, you're going to need a total of 32 copies of her from the premium box. And guys, if you're enjoying this type of content where I review Tsums, do monthly leaks, and go over the selection box as well as the premium boxes, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Your subscription really helps me out a lot. Alright, so let's take a look at the skill chart at the bottom right hand corner. And like I mentioned earlier, depending on what skill level you have her at, that's going to decide how many copies of her you need to clear before you can activate her ability. The higher the skill level, the less amount of Tsums you need to clear before activating her ability. At skill level 1, you're going to need to clear a total of 30 copies of her, but if you have her at skill level 6, you're going to need 5 less, which is only 25. Now, the other component to her ability is her skill range. The higher the skill level, the bigger the burst radius is going to be when you pop that last bubble, which is the flower. And actually, the skill range does come into play twice. First time is the standard burst that comes in every single ability. And then the second part is that special magic flower bubble that comes out, which is red, where you can move it. And that part is also bigger every single time. So the higher the skill level, the bigger the burst for both of those bubbles that will come out. Alright, so let's take a look at skill level 1, 2, and 3. And the major difference here is the skill range. Is that, as you can see here for skill level 1, the skill range is going to be extra small. So the burst radius is going to be relatively small. And also you're going to need a total of 30 copies of her. So skill level 1, it is going to be a little bit more difficult to use. But if you have her at skill level 3 as an example here, it does get better. The skill range is going to be medium, and you're going to need only 28 copies of her to activate her ability. It's still not going to be amazing, honestly, but it does significantly improve. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the strategy when it comes to using this Tsum. So her ability has two components really. The first part is that burst in the middle, which you cannot control. And then secondly is that flower bubble that you can move around. So if you notice closely or pay attention to the ability, the screen doesn't freeze during animation time. So what that means is that you can actually spam the ability button at all times if you wanted to, which I actually do sometimes. Or you can monitor the ability button, and once that thing gets 50% charge, you can start activating the ability or start pressing the button, and any of the residuals will go into the second charge up, saving you a lot more Tsums to charge up and activate the ability for the second time go around. And then that's bubble that you see there, the red flower that gets burst, you can't control that first one, and it's always going to be in the center. So ideally, you want to avoid having bubbles in the center of the screen if you can. So I would recommend bursting those bubbles off the screen before activating the ability. They do get in the way a little bit. Once you get to the higher skill levels though, you can't really control that. But for these lower skill levels, you typically can move those bubbles by bursting them before you activate the ability. Now, the second component and the second tip that I have for you guys is that you can move that red bubble after the initial burst is made, but honestly the center area is usually where you want to burst your big bubbles anyways, so technically it spawns right there for you already and you don't necessarily need to move it. However, if you are playing at the lower levels, you may want to strategize just a little bit and move that flower bubble to an area that has a lot more charm flowers or even just flower Snow Whites in the area. By doing that, you'll be able to activate more abilities per game because you're constantly charging up your ability bar. Now let's take a look at the ability side by side for these three skill levels. So here we have the animation in full speed. I'm just going to let this play through and then I'll slow it down for you so we can analyze what's happening. So as you activate the ability, there's really nothing you can really control here, so just enjoy the animation as it plays through. And honestly, this burst first burst, for these lower skill levels are not that amazing and it's really not that helpful. For skill level 1, I got a chain of 14. Skill level 2 got 17. And skill level 3, I got 18. But as you can see there, the skill range does matter. So the higher the skill level, the bigger that range is going to be. Now this second burst here, you can actually move this bubble. So this flower bubble can be moved around if you wish to, but I personally don't move it too much because it saves a little bit more time when you're playing through the animation, and the center area is typically the most optimal spot anyways. But if you have a lot of bubbles in the center area, then it may be advantageous to move that thing around so that way you could burst more Tsums. And the results for this animation is for skill level 1 I got 14, skill level 2 I got 19, and skill level 3 I got 20. So your results may vary depending on where you end up dropping that magic bubble at the very end. And honestly, you could technically save them as well if you don't want to use it right away. Maybe a fever time is coming up and you don't necessarily want to use it right away. And because you can move it around, it can be advantageous to save that rose, or the red bubble I mean, and burst it later to get yourself back into fever time. So that's another way of playing it as well. Alright, so let's transition to taking a look at the higher skill levels. So for skill level 4, 5, and 6. And by the way, if you haven't been watching these videos, I'm changing up the method. I'm only going to do one video per Tsum now, and instead of breaking up the Tsums by 2 different videos, I'm going to be combining both of them for skill level, the lower skill level as well as the higher skill level. So for this portion, it's going to be the higher skill level. So for skill level 4, the skill range is going to be large with a clear of 27. And then skill level 5, it's a skill range of extra large and you need 26 to activate it. And finally for skill level 6, the skill range is extra large. And you're going to need to get a total of 25 copies of her off the screen to activate the ability. And by the way, the charm flowers will also count. So not only will you be able to charge up the ability bar by clearing Snow White's, but also the flowers as well. So that's why it's a really good Tsum, as any charm Tsum is actually really good. You're essentially getting a free 5-4, and all of the charms that show up will be counting towards the charge up bar. So at these higher skill levels, they are better. The same strategy can be applied, but like I mentioned earlier, at these higher skill levels, you're more likely to have a bubble that will get in your way. And that's because the burst radius or the burst range is going to be so much bigger that if any bubble on the screen essentially will get in the way. Like you see there for skill level 6, there was a bubble there and it didn't really optimize my burst. Yeah, what I could have done there is save that rose bubble and maybe burst a regular bubble first and then burst that rose bubble. But what I've been doing is I'm going really full speed ahead and just activating the ability and bursting all the Tsums as soon as possible, just to keep the game going. Alright, so let's take a look at a side-by-side comparison of the ability activated at the same time at these higher skill level. And again, the strategy doesn't change. You're essentially doing the same thing between skill level 1 and skill level 6. There's not much you could really do at these early portions of the animation, but I wanted to show you the skill range here. You could clearly see that at skill level 6, the clear radius is going to be a lot bigger than skill level 4 and significantly bigger compared to the skill level 1 that you saw earlier. The skill range does take up pretty much the entire screen there for skill level 6. And if you look at the results here, the initial burst, I ended up getting 22 for skill level 4, 23 for skill level 5, and 25 for skill level 6. And these are relatively standard. I got pretty consistent results with these, and depending if you have a bubble or not, that's going to vary a little bit. Now, this second part, you could technically move around, but like I mentioned earlier, I just stick with the center area, just very easy versus wasting time to try to find the most optimal spot. So there's different ways you could play this bubble here, but as you can see here, just bursting it right away. For skill level 4 and 5, I ended up with a chain of 25, and then for skill level 6, I got a chain of 29. So still pretty good results by just bursting it in the middle. So I think if you just use my strategy, you do save a couple of seconds by doing that. So depending on how you play, it's going to vary a little bit. Now, my overall experience with Charm Flower Snow White is that she's not that good at the lower skill level, so for skill level 1, 2, and 3. And she's really not worth using your 5-4 and coin boost until you get to realistically skill level 5. You can technically use the 5-4 and coin boost at skill level 4, but it's really not worth it. And for this Tsum, I don't recommend using your skill tickets to get her to skill level 6, but if you have coins, you can. But I don't think that it's worth your investment to get additional boxes to try to max her out. To get from skill level 5 to skill level 6, you're going to need additional 16 copies of her. So if you don't have everything else maxed out, it's going to be pretty difficult to get 16 more copies of her just for additional coins there. Alright, so let me show you the results for all 6 of these gameplays that you just saw. For skill level 1, I ended up with 3.6 million points with 1,043 coins. So skill level 1, not really worth it. And like I mentioned earlier, it's not until skill level 5 where I was able to get 9.4 million points with a coin earnings of 3,160 coins was when it's worth using the 5-4 and the coin boost. Now, if you don't use the 5-4 and coin boost, it's also okay, and you're likely going to be okay by playing that way up to skill level 3. And then by skill level 4, you might want to start considering using the 5-4 and the coin boost because you may get lucky with a coin fairy. And looking at skill level 6 and skill level 5, there was a difference of roughly about 1,000 coins. So 1,000 coins, but you need to spend 16 skill tickets or spend a lot of coins to try to get her to skill level 6. So I don't think it's worth it. So overall, I think that Charm Flower Snow White is going to be a really easy Tsum to use out of the 3. And she's going to be good for beginners, but really not worth spending your coins on. I would say stick with trying to get Charm Flower Cinderella instead and practice with her a little bit more to really get the good coin earnings. And yeah, this Tsum here is really for its ease, but not really for coin earning. So that's my review for Charm Flower Snow White. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video or at least found it entertaining. And if you guys would like to see more Tsum Tsum content just like this, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching.